I'm very thankful to all of you, and I want to say that first introduce Dr. Sarika Jain ma'am from NIT Kurukshetra. Uh, so please introduce please introduce Dr. Sarika Jain ma'am.
Yes, sir. Dr. Sarika Jain graduated from Jawaharlal Nehru University in 2001. Her doctorate in the field of knowledge representation in artificial intelligence, which was awarded in 2011. She has served in the field of education over 19 years and is currently working at National Institute of Technology, Kurukshetra, India. Dr. Jain has authored over 100 publications, including books, and entitled many academic efforts. Her current research interests including knowledge management and analytics, semantic web, ongoing engineering, and intelligent system. She is currently working towards solving interpretability problems generated by IoT, big data, and cloud computing invitees. Dr. Jain has supervised two doctoral scholars who are now pursuing their postdoctorates, one in Spain and another in Germany. She is a senior of IEEE, life member of CSI and various other technical societies. She has her credit two research funded projects. One ongoing project is funding by CRIS TechCube 3 worth rupees 2.58 lakhs and another completed project funded by DRDO India worth 40 lakhs. Dr. Jain has visited United Kingdom and Singapore for presenting her research work. She has continuously been supervising DAAD interns from different German universities. Ma'am.
Hello, good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
Are the slides visible there?
Yes, ma'am, they are visible.
Uh, okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning to one and all present here. I am Sarika Jain from NIT Kurukshetra. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me here and for delivering something on this very important topic, that is what is happening around COVID-19 and how technology is helping COVID-19. As the worthy director of the institute, Professor Mishra, just commented over the usage of technology in different domains of life during this pandemic situation, my talk is just about that. Technology cannot prevent the onset of the pandemics, as we all know. However, it can help prevent the spread. It can educate, it can warn and empower the public and noticeably lessen the impact. So my topic here is situation awareness during global epidemic. Almost every industry is being challenged to quickly adapt to this new world brought in front of us during COVID-19. For a true digital organization, companies must have an agile backbone that can adapt to new technology. The agenda of the session will be discussing the trajectory of technological progress in general and in respect to COVID-19 also, presenting the available use cases and applications for the global epidemic situation, understanding semantic intelligence as an upcoming form of computing, defining and detailing the need of semantic intelligence and its role in global epidemic, the enabling technologies, the semantic web vision. Before closing, this session will bring to the audience a list of takeaways from the today's presentation, then a list of selected bibliography. Let us start with the trajectory of technological progress. Starting from the pre-90th century BC, there was use of fire, wheel, language. The 90th century to 1900, it was development of civilization, printing press, science, steam engine, electricity. Governments also came up. During the same reign, information technology came during the third industrial revolution in 1969. And 1784, it was first industrial revolution, yeah, steam power. 1870, second industrial revolution, electricity. 1900 to 2017, worldwide use of electricity was there. Telephone, radio, television, computers, internet. 1969 it was industrial revolution. That was the third industrial revolution, and IT came there. Fourth industrial revolution is today, that is 2020. So it has three different dimensions. Before 2016, it was ANI, artificial narrow intelligence, ability to carry out specific tasks. For example, play chess, driverless cars. You might have heard of some chatbots, Siri and Alexa. ANI is in fact the current state of the art. From 2020 onwards, it will be AI's golden age. We say that AGI has begun, the artificial general intelligence, the ability to carry out various tasks that a human could do. From 2050, we can say it will be artificial superintelligence, ASI, that is the ability to learn from experiences and from new data to perform a wide range of actions, and also to generate some computer code on its own. So I repeat, to generate computer code on its own. Let us see how technology is serving as a bridge in different domains during the COVID-19, that is the technological impact on COVID-19. So identify and predict and track also the different outbreaks. The better we can track the virus, the better we can fight with it. This is done by analyzing the reports, social media platforms, government documents and all. There is a Canadian startup also, Blue Dot, that is doing exactly the same thing. Early detect and diagnose and also monitor the virus. AI company Infervision and the Chinese giant Alibaba. Let me take a highlighter and I hope I can mark where I am in right now. Okay, then it is situation awareness and social control. Making the public aware is very important, and how technology is doing this, we will see it in this presentation. Then we have chatbots to share information. Tencent operates WeChat, a chat box for COVID-19, predicting the protein structure, reducing the workload of health workers, even including the administrative burden. Data is made more legible and analyzable. Remote patient monitoring, that is able to send info using IoT sensors and wearables. And there are advanced fabrics which offer protection. There is a Israeli startup, Sonovia, for arming the healthcare systems and others with face masks. Drug discovery, Google's DeepMind division is there for drug discovery, and it is working hard for that, publishing the findings to help others developing treatments. To process the healthcare claims, and Financial is a Chinese firm which is working in this direction. To implement the quarantine and self-isolation is important. Various cameras and digital recorders, the global positioning systems are there. AI is there to identify even non-compliance of people, to identify people who might have a fever and be more likely to have the virus. Similar technology powers smart helmets also to identify people with fevers. There are robots to sterilize everything as they are not susceptible to the virus. UVD robots from Blue Ocean Robotics. There is in China Pudu technology also deployed. Supercomputers are there for working on vaccine. We have drones delivering the medical supplies. They're also used for patrolling public spaces and also to track the non-compliance to quarantine the mandates. For thermal imaging also we are using drones. We have predictive and preventive healthcare. AI is helping in it. Contact tracing for the individuals, as I already said, to identify and track the individuals who might have come in contact with an infected person. So yes, all these technological advancements are impacting COVID-19, but it is a virtuous cycle. COVID-19 is in turn impacting the technological advancements. Let us see how. The top trends that are shaping any post-epidemic future are infection prevention, remote commerce, improving the resiliency and improving or having the greater agility, and macroeconomic impacts are also there. Each of these trends can have a positive or even a negative influence on an emerging technology. So we have to have a control over it, so that COVID-19 can prove a boon also for the technological advancements. What is resilience? Resilience and agility are the two skills that equip people to respond to change. Resilience is our ability to quickly and effectively recover from a challenging situation. We need to reprogram ourselves and find the growth opportunities inside every challenge. Agility is our ability to move quickly and take decisions, move quickly and decisively, I should say, and to do so with much of ease and comfort. We need to act upon the opportunities, even with insufficient data. That is a rapid prototyping model. We even have the macroeconomic impacts. If you remember the 1918 influenza, yes, we all of us, I think, were not born even then. It is generally considered as the costliest epidemic in modern history. Then came SARS 2003, bird flu, swine flu, Ebola virus. There is to be a demand and supply balance is to be there to manage the macroeconomic impacts. Regarding COVID-19, it has been characterized by much faster transmission as compared to the previous viruses because of the international integration, resulting in large-scale containment policies like lockdown and social distancing, resulting in a sudden economic stop. What is containment? They are the policies of preventing the expansion, that is keeping under control everything. For example, lockdown and social distancing I just mentioned. Because of these containment policies, there is a sudden economic stop. If I consider even India, let us see what benefits we have attained even after COVID-19. There are savings due to elimination of non-existent or duplicate beneficiaries. So COVID-19 has actually accelerated the India's digital reset, meaning digital first is there. Coronavirus propelled the use of contactless digital technology across India. The use of robots and drones, as I just said, payments made entirely via digital platforms. In India alone, there is a saving of approximately, you can see, 21 USD billions due to elimination of non-existent beneficiaries or duplicate beneficiaries or fraud beneficiaries. This was possible in India because of certain government schemes as Ujjwala, Aadhaar card, etc. Let us see how COVID-19 is accelerating the technological advancement. As I have just said, it is like a virtuous cycle. COVID-19, there is Aadhaar card. Mobile phones and bank accounts are linked to the Aadhaar card, the digitally authenticated Aadhaar identification number. Then there is India Stack. You might have come across. Aadhaar is also the base for India Stack. That is a set of open APIs. I will take the highlighter. What is India Stack? It is a set of open APIs which developers can use as foundations for their applications. eKYC, UPI, DigiLocker, you might be using some of them. There are drones, robots, and wearables. As I told, for remote patient monitoring, also we are using these wearables. Drones like Cobot, they spray disinfectants, survey areas, monitor the containment zones, and also make public announcements. The private businesses like Byju's and Jio are making money like anything. There are aggregator apps. What are these? For example, vendors like those selling vegetables, flying rickshaws are now able to provide door-to-door services, thus providing a stable source of income to them. Similarly, in education, many schools have shifted to online classrooms, while students and educators with limited internet connectivity are also learning via mobile phones. What is telemedicine? It allows long distance clinical services to patients, including patient care, reminders, education, monitoring, video consultations, and even remote admissions also. All these come under telemedicine. We have Arogya Setu app. You might have installed it on your mobile phones. It is a government initiative to effectively track and monitor the spread of COVID-19. India India's NIC, National Informatics Center, created the Arogya Setu app. We have National Health Stack by Niti Aayog to embrace the health management systems, even managing the demand and supply of equipments like ventilators as well as other essential medical items. So this is a cycle. Technology is helping COVID-19, yes, but COVID-19 has also accelerated the various technological advancements in all over the globe. So now let us have a look on the available use cases and applications which come across because of COVID-19. There is Converge Health Connect, Deloitte Digital Together with Salesforce Health Cloud, designed and accelerator Converge Health Connect. It is useful in crisis response. It enables healthcare organizations to digitally triage, monitor, and remotely manage the treatment of coronavirus patients and also the quarantined people. Triage means deciding upon the order of treatment, discussing the priority or putting all the patients under priority, assigning priorities to the patient that which patient should be taken up first. So these are the different use cases they have worked upon. For medical teams, they have done. For individuals, they have done. For healthcare systems, even there is automatic risk stratification, real-time documentation monitoring, all digital available with us. We have Health Map as a Boston Children's Hospital. Health Map visually represents the disease outbreaks according to location. It can do according to the time and type of contagious virus or disease it can do, or according even to the bacterial disease that is being carried out while entering into the city. Health Map can tell us about that before entering the city. So what is this? This is situation awareness that we have to do today. James Norman, the Chief Information Officer of Healthcare at Dell Technologies, talks about digital pathology. That is, round-the-clock medical results are available, and these round-the-clock results are even more accurate and quicker because you are getting them digitally. There is real-time data and analysis, that is, instant updates are being done. SeraCare developed the UK's first app-based care provider. What it is providing? Data sharing. Also anticipating whether a person is cared for or not, and digital dashboards. So SeraCare is incorporating the predictive AI technology to keep all those being cared for at home, and importantly out of hospital. The patients are kept out of hospital and then also the care is with them. All the stakeholders are, what is data sharing? All the stakeholders are reading from the same page. The family is instantly being updated of everything. You can anticipate if a person being cared is at a risk or not, at a risk of deteriorating, then a special care can be given. There are digital dashboards with continuously updated information and also action taking, like contacting a relative or the general practitioner or even calling 111. So according to Anant Krishnan, that is CTO of TCS, they want to focus on drug discovery. Even before the coronavirus outbreak, TCS was working with AI-based methods to explore chemistry and medical manufacturing. But what they find is that the AI-based approach can reduce the initial phase of the drug discovery process from several years to a few days. And we are going to see how. Ventic is there. You can have the video also on YouTube, and for digital, it is providing digital workers. Ventic tells what to do in some unprecedented situation, for example, this virus. Ventic, what it does, an airline passenger monitoring system also it has developed, in which the temperature of each traveler is taken and as they come off the plane. In fact, Ventic is providing speedy app development for certain use cases as it is providing certain API. Bits in Glass is developing a social distancing app for retail stores using the Ventic. Amorph Systems is building an application for thermal monitoring, risk management, quarantine management, tracking, and smart routing of people in hospitals also. Digital workers, as I just said for Vantech, there are even university hospitals of Morecambe Bay are employing digital workers to help patients book, prepare for, and follow up appointments. With 6 lakhs hospital appointments booked a year, there is no way that staff could proactively manage this level of personalized communication manually. So it is removing the daily burden of medical staff of updating the patient records. Blue Prism, its cloud-based intelligent automation platform, is also providing AI-powered digital workers. Another is situation awareness, which I really want to talk today. SAS is providing real-time situation awareness as an example. I have brought this. The primary challenge now at the time of crisis is to integrate and streamline the digital infrastructure at various stages of public health response. So we require situation awareness. This is a one related and important use case, a very important use case, that is patient monitoring, where IoT devices and sensors are used to monitor patients either at home or in care facility. How it happens, situation awareness is important for both in all the three, pre-epidemic, during epidemic, and post-epidemic stages. Respond, recover, and reimagine. Respond is to determine how severe, widespread, and fast moving the disruption can be or was likely to be, and how should we respond. So this is situation awareness. Recover, when it is done, then it can help us guide our decisions as we are recovering from COVID-19. And even reimagine, that is to inform the changes we make. As we start to reimagine the new world, we start to rebuild our workplaces, healthcare systems, economies, policies. Situation awareness is playing a role in all the three situations. We have MapDash COVID-19 Basic for providing situation awareness in US. Data appears in, I think, I remember 16 layers they have prepared on the interactive map, with each one allowing to learn more by simply clicking on it. Some of the layers include COVID-19 cases by country. You can bring, I've done a spelling mistake in country. Hospitals and number of beds and ICU facility available, pharmacies located in areas, information of schools, their closure, the reopening status, and much more. There are various layers with only by click on a map, the US people can get all the situation, get aware of the situation. So what is situation awareness? It means understanding your surroundings. And kindly concentrate, there are two things. You have to understand your surroundings and combining them with the pre-existing knowledge, that is in knowledge bases, to determine the possible trend of actions. That is to generate the actionable knowledge. We require both the things. What has happened today, that is our surroundings, and also to integrate the background knowledge into it, the pre-existing knowledge into it. For example, the patient's today's heartbeat, the patient's today's reports, along with the diagnosis that is already available in the EHR records, that if this is the symptom, then this is the disease. So both the knowledges should be combined to determine the possible trend of actions. Situation awareness guides our responses, whether it is patient monitoring, that is the high risk task, or just planning a vacation. You should know, you should understand the city or the country where you are going, that isn't it a high spot area, or things like that. So during corona time also it is very important. So here we envision several knowledge graphs. I introduced the term in this slide, knowledge graphs, and we will understand what it is. That is both the personal, patient specific, but also the medical knowledge graphs. And all of them have to evolve, although potentially at a very, very different pace. Both the knowledge graphs can evolve at a very different pace. Here comes the role of smart and intelligent applications, and not only the traditional technology, the traditional AI, the traditional artificial intelligence may not work. So knowledge graphs will play a role. Both types of knowledge graphs, or maybe more, can be there, and they have to be integrated together. The personal patient specific knowledge graph and the general medical knowledge graphs both have to be there to provide situation awareness for a particular situation. So next we will discuss this topic only, that is semantic intelligence, how knowledge graphs are playing a role, that is understanding semantic intelligence. I like to take a halt of 1 minute. I like to talk to my audience. If there are any queries, I want to understand the way you want me to take your queries. I am okay if you interrupt me in between, and I am okay if you want me to finish everything till 12 and then take the queries. But the better way, I suppose, is I should halt in between whenever a new agenda is to come, and I can take your queries. So I like to ask the participants, do you have any query from me till now regarding what I have told till now? This is a Microsoft Teams, so I do not have a chat window. I can see chat in channel meetings is only available to team members. I cannot see anything in the chat. Dr. Kapil or anybody will like to interrupt?
Sir, madam, what do you mean by this word semantic?
Yes, this is my next agenda. What I mean by semantic, what I mean by semantic intelligence, what are knowledge graphs. I just introduced the term. I will come to it. What is semantic intelligence? I'll come to it. This is the next topic I'll discuss. Anything else?
So, Dr. Sarika, this is Vikrant. I'm here in US.
Yeah.
The trajectory of the technological progress that you talk about is very well now being a part of our life here. Like, for instance, if we have any medical urgency, so rather than going to the regional medical centers, what we do is here a telemedicine. So we
Yeah.
talk through our insurance companies, and they provide us a traction. So like I have a primary care practitioner who needs to talk about my blood pressure medication. So rather than going and having an appointment, all we just do is through the chat windows, through various the interacting tools we have as of now. We talk to them and they just prescribe us the medication that we pick up from our nearby Costco or CVS or Walgreens. And then there are certain aspects like the Apple is providing here on the West Coast side of United States, in which we have certain legitimacy where we just definitely the technology play a real important thing in this COVID handling, because we down the line like 24/7 have easy interactions and we work from our home rather than going to us. And as a matter of fact, my company Intel, they wants to have a home things to be done like all the way till June 2021 unless the matter getting settled or we have a vaccination in hand. So yes, technology bring a lot of advancements, and every company and industry, specifically we all know the x86 based architectural. Intel is a pioneer in the processors, what all the technologies we are talking about, and we certainly bring a lot of things on the table that is currently helping us out, whether it's the laptops.
Exactly. Exactly, Mr. Vikrant, you are right. Technology is doing a lot. That is true. So may I have your query?
Oh no, I was just trying to giving a
Summarize.
formulation what you say, and I was just trying to correlate the things, what the technology playing in our hand.
Definitely.
Thank you. Really appreciate the slide deck you have.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vikrant. So that is why I started with what technology has done in COVID-19. And then I told it as a virtuous cycle. COVID-19 has also advanced the technology. And yes, I do not feel bad saying that the COVID-19 has acted as a litmus test for the public, for all the researchers, for all the academicians and the industry people, because truly said technology is not able to do what it should have done. There are lots of deaths happening. So where are we lagging? That I have brought in this presentation today. What we should do so that we can have much better results from what we have today.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, so I'll continue now. That is understanding semantic intelligence. Let us go with it. As I just told, we require knowledge graphs. So what is semantic intelligence? So I'll start with the two paradigms in AI research, the symbolic AI and the sub-symbolic AI. So what is symbolic AI? I have just one slide for it. The expert systems, we call it good old-fashioned AI also, the rules engines, the traditional AI. You might have done the first attempts to AI, I should say, 1950s till 1980s. You might have done all the tools and techniques in AI textbooks, Rich and Knight, Russell Norvig, whatever you have studied there. That is symbolic AI. No algorithmic training involved, dynamic, verifiable, and explainable model they were. Yes, they were. Now, let us look problems with symbolic AI. Before that, let me repeat some more terms with symbolic AI, what we used to read in Rich and Knight, what they were. Propositional logic, we read. First order predicate calculus is there. Lisp Prolog, we used to program with Lisp and Prolog. If then statements, is man X, if you remember, the branch and bound problems, heuristic search, A star search, all those are symbolic logic. We work with facts and rules. The facts are there stored, then there are rules, and with forward and backward chaining, you run the rules and you get the results. So there are explanations also. We, in general, we call them the expert systems. Now, what are the problems with symbolic AI? Till today also, in all the syllabus, there are artificial intelligence, but the traditional artificial intelligence is being taught to the today's students. Let us see what are the problems there. As rules are created through human intervention, the human beings are creating the rules, so it is costly and time consuming. For any new domain, you have to recreate the rules. A monotonicity problem is there. Additional rules cannot undo the previous rules, cannot undo the old knowledge. Expert systems are very monotonic. That is, difficulty of belief revision comes in. There is symbol grounding problem. That is, how do words or symbols get their meaning? The symbols may not be able to link to their exact representation that is understandable by computers. The solution to symbol grounding problem comes in as neural nets, because they can link symbols to vectorized representations of the data. Neural networks are able to ground the symbols. They are able to relate the symbols to other forms of meaning that would allow computers to map the changing world. The point to emphasize here is that symbolic reasoning is very adequate for reasoning about mathematics. Is very adequate for very small closed systems. When a system is closed means it is not changing at all. There are no new rules that we require to add. When the system is very well defined and with well defined properties, for example, the chess game, for example, the game of chess, symbolic AI is very good. If you remember the water jug problem, symbolic AI is good on all these, but unfortunately there are multiple dead ends which are quickly reached. So it was found that philosophers had predicted that you could hardly build a machine capable of reasoning about the real world through purely symbolic means. So here comes the sub-symbolic approach from 1980 onwards. The sub-symbolic approach to AI manages to approach AI without any specific representations of knowledge. It is the current state of AI. All the students and all the researchers talk about machine learning and deep learning today. That is sub-symbolic AI, that is statistical AI, connectionist AI, the neural networks, the deep neural networks. Without being explicitly programmed, machines are able to execute a task. Machines can learn automatically and adjust actions automatically. This is what is machine learning. AI research is becoming more and more scientific. Whatever results you are getting, they are measurable and reproducible. Today we talk about precision, recall, F-measure, accuracy, which we didn't speak about when we did symbolic AI. Rich and Knight doesn't talk about precision and accuracy. So our results today in machine learning are measurable and reproducible. This is statistical AI. So what is the beauty of sub-symbolic AI or statistical AI? We have a classical example of translating a note from language A to language B. For example, you have to translate a note from A to B. What you do is you have a dictionary of languages with various keywords translating from A to B. You just pick on words from language A note and translate them into language B note as it is. So this is sub-symbolic AI, and it is doing it very beautifully. In symbolic approach, what we used to do is we used to just translate with the dictionary, while here what you do, you learn. The machine is able to translate it automatically, quickly, and in a more scientific manner from A to B. We'll see more to it. Let us have a look on the problems with the sub-symbolic AI, and we need to concentrate here. The most critical distinction in machines and humans is the way in which we reason. Humans reason through high order semantic abstraction. Semantic, okay, you ask what is semantic? Semantic is meaning. Meaning is the heart of everything. That is the context. Humans understand meaning, but the machines do not understand meaning. I'll come to it in detail later on also, in later slides also. So humans reason about the world through semantic abstractions. They look abstractly very much, but machines adhere to whatever statistics are there. So this is the major problem with sub-symbolic AI. Let us look at it one by one. There is a cold start problem. That is, the sub-symbolic AI is data hungry. As you all know that from Kaggle data sets, we are taking data. The whole approach of deep learning is based on an assumption that there is enough of data every time to learn from. Another major problem is the black box AI. That is the lack of model interpretability. Interpretation is a problem. For example, the language translation example we have just told, how exactly the things are classified in one way or another cannot be explained. It is the very intrinsic nature of the ML algorithms that they are not able to explain, because it is black box AI. For example, for this example only, the translation example, the machine will translate language A text into language B text, but it will not be able to explain how it has done it. But in symbolic, they are able to explain, because they have that dictionary from which they have just taken the meaning of every word and translated. So if humans are not explained of some decision, then there is a risk of making a final wrong decision, which may outweigh the benefits. Learning this translating example or learning Mandarin was not at all a difficult task. But the problem is it cannot explain how it is translated. This is the black box AI, the sub-symbolic approach. The third important problem is background knowledge. The sub-symbolic approaches are self-contained and they are not well integrated with the prior knowledge. That is, they lack a cushion of background knowledge, I should say. The next one is diversity in training data, which is so critical to ensure the machine sees a lot of counter examples. This is not very realistic, because you cannot have so many examples always in every domain. There is a problem of overfitting and underfitting. The input features have to be very carefully selected and normalized also. If you get too many features, or you do not have even some basic representative data set, then there are problems of either overfitting or underfitting. There is the stability assumption. That is, your system have to be utmost stable. The data-driven algorithms implicitly assume that your model is relatively stable. There should be no changes are allowed. In fact, I should say, they are missing the common sense reasoning. You know, as I just mentioned, Kaggle is providing everything neatly packaged to you as compared to the real world sporadic data. Deep learning has struggled with the open-ended inference also. If you're not able to represent the nuance, like the difference between John promised Mary to leave, John promised to leave Mary, you can't draw inferences about who is leaving whom. Right? Okay. So Yes, I'll continue. There are few more problems. I have brought all in front of you, the major ones. Challenging for mission critical applications. The sub-symbolic approaches, because they are working as approximations, so the answers are always challenging, and if they are mission critical applications, then you are in a problem. For example, you have a motor scooter, and the machine confuses it with a parachute if it is upside down. If a motor scooter is toppled over, then the machine can mistake it as a parachute. There is a problem of monotonic reasoning, because retraining is always necessary to adjust the new incoming data. So we say that ML algorithms are monotonic and they are not handling the known monotonicity. Exception handling is a problem, because exceptions are treated as noise by the classical ML algorithms. For instance, if the training set consists of different descriptions of birds, say classified as either a bird flies or it doesn't fly, then certain records consisting of penguin or ostrich will most probably be treated as noise. The exceptions are treated as noise, and we are not able to give answers for the exceptions. So this technological progress, I come back to the trajectory. This is the DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agencies, they said third wave of AI. So deep learning, symbolic AI 1970s to 1990s, it is symbolic AI. 2000 till present. Today also people are doing sub-symbolic AI, the ML algorithms, the deep learning algorithms, but this deep learning AI is the AI for the good weather. But we need an AI that can learn quickly, that can produce answers to questions. I'm saying answers to questions, not only, for example, Google search allows us to scroll through different documents and then find our answer. What we want direct answer to whatever question we are posing. That is, we want question answering systems, not only that predictions based on the obsolete data that is already there. So from 2020 onwards, we call it contextual computing. The explainable AI, we call it. For that, we need to understand semantic computing first of all. For semantic computing, let us look at the paradigm shift. There is a paradigm shift from data to knowledge. The DIKW pyramid. What is data? Data refers to raw facts, the numbers, the symbols as they are coded. What is information? When context is embedded into data, adds meaning to the data. In the context of date, if we say, if I speak 2006 2020, then if it is the context of date, then we say it 20th June 2020, and it gets a meaning and it becomes information. 2006 2020 becomes an information when we say, oh, we are talking about dates. Otherwise it is just a data. So after information is defining the relationships also. You know who, what, when and where. With data you are knowing nothing. Here we know who, what, when and where also. Then comes knowledge. Knowledge means how. You are able to know how. How is the information that is derived from the collective data becomes relevant to our goals. Then we say it is knowledge when it becomes relevant to our goal, whatever goal we are achieving. Though 20th June 2020 is an information that it is a date, but what importance does it carry for me today? Then it is some knowledge. All the pieces of information connect to add more meaning and value, and when it is applied to achieve our goal, we say that it is knowledge. When some information becomes useful for us, we say that it is knowledge. After knowledge, in the stack comes understanding. Understanding is some form of shared knowledge. As table of 2, I understand table of 2, my kid understands table of 2, so he has developed the understanding. When an understanding is added, if he crams the table of 2, it is just data for him. But when he understands the table of 2 or any other table, he is able to answer very difficult questions like 1230 into 45. Knowledge is just memorizing, while understanding is learning. I hope by this statement it can be clear. Knowledge is memorizing, while understanding is learning it. That is what I mean by saying learning. By learning, I do not mean cramming or memorizing. By learning, when we use it in computer context, we mean synthesizing new knowledge from the old knowledge. The old knowledge the kid has is that he understands table of 2. So he is able to deduce new knowledge. What is 44 into 2? He is able to deduce from the understanding he has, that is table of 2. So we achieve wisdom when we have understanding, when we are able to judge, when we are able to put our understanding and knowledge into action. You know the best, and one thing more, and why. You know the best and you know why. Why have you achieved this result? You know that also. That is wisdom. Today, computers do not have wisdom. Example of wisdom, one example of wisdom can be the ancient preachings, the sayings. One example, you say, I think we have done a lot on knowledge, information, data, information, knowledge and wisdom, and you by now understand what is wisdom. It is human beings only who possess wisdom, to be specific. And also the sub-symbolic approaches are working on data and information only. They are till the data in the DIKW pyramid. What semantic intelligence focuses upon is knowledge. If you climb up the knowledge, then you will get what you want to achieve. We do not have to look back into the past, but you have to look into the future. We are moving forward. Less meaning to more meaning, we are moving. This is data is less applicable, so you are moving from less applicability to more applicability. That is deriving value which is equivalent to human being. That is human being is sitting at the top. That is wisdom. We are moving from data management to knowledge management through information management, data science to knowledge science. So do not talk about data science and data analytics. Talk about knowledge science and knowledge analytics. Yes.
So Sarika, I have a question. So peeling back the onion, data is a collection of facts and figures, which is in a raw form that is processed to produce a meaningful information that goes, once we have that information, it transforms into knowledge. And like you said, it's wisdom. But then there are certain gray areas, what the way we want the artificial intelligence as of now is that just we need master slave configurations, in which there are certain things which a machine can do. Of course, there are certain caveats to catch here, but this explicitly talks about, yes, the wisdom cannot be given to the machines. It's a certain gray area, but then there are certain caveats that are regular day-to-day operations that a machine can do, and that's what we need the artificial intelligence for. Remember. So my question here is, with respect to the transitioning from data to the wisdom top of the chart, yes, human beings are on the top of it because we designs it, and we needs to be the masters, and then the subsequent things for the artificial intelligence to be an AI. So what I wants to understand is, isn't it the information that we are sharing? It's about the time sensitivity in this the DIKW pyramid you're showing about. Because if let's say if there is an
you'll have to repeat the exact question you want to ask.
So I'm asking this from the top to the bottom of this pyramid. We understand where we each categorized humans beings are on the top, and the subsequent one can a machine be done. But the missing context, what I feel is the time sensitivity, isn't it? Let's say we have a raw data, we process it into a meaningful information, and if it is not processed in a certain sequence of time, then sometimes the information is of no values.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is true. That is okay. This is what actually the basic problem is. The data which is there in the machine doesn't carry any meaning. It is data. As we store it in RDBMS, as we store it in database. So the time stamping should be there. And how do we add the time stamping? That is only through relationships. This is what I mentioned, that you need to define relationships. For example, you draw ER diagrams while storing into an RDBMS. You draw an ER diagram, but you do not have very crucial relationships stored into your RDBMS. You are not able to do inferencing with your RDBMS. You are not able to reason with your RDBMS. I focus on the terms inferencing and reasoning, which we do not do with the today's ML algorithms, with the deep learning algorithms. They answer us, but they do not tell that which data, which time instant, which time slots data they have used. They are not able to explain to us. For example, a machine diagnose a person with lung cancer. Oh, lung cancer. But why lung cancer? How lung cancer? The machine has told the doctor that this patient has lung cancer. Now you just declare it, you just announce it. But the doctor has to find the facts. The doctor has to find how lung cancer. Please tell me, how do I believe you? The humans cannot believe. This is the problem, and this comes through knowledge only. This comes through knowledge management only. If you embed meaning through relationships and time stamps and space stamps, all the relationships, if you embed, you are able to do that. And with time, I say you'll able to achieve wisdom. I think there is a background noise. You can listen a background noise, I think. I'll just close the door for a second.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Vikrant, I hope I'm able to.
Yeah, I think I got the
clarify.
answer. Thank you, ma'am. You can carry on. Sorry about the interruption.
Let us proceed further, and if you have any queries in between, you could always interrupt. So the point to make here is that we have to rise up the pyramid. We have to move from data management to knowledge management, and with sub-symbolic approaches only. We are doing only data management. We are doing the data analytics. We need to climb up the mountain of wisdom, and semantic technologies make it possible.
Yeah, exactly. I just was talking about like there's so much of innovation and deep learning we're talking about, but then nothing is perfect, you know. We tend to make the perfect out of it. And for instance, there was a recent article that I was reading in the Bloomberg a few weeks back, which talking about the deep learning that Google is doing an experiment, and they said giving a choice to the deep learning program that what is meant by Black Lives Matters, and it just goes through the web articles, which is the algorithm runs around, and it says it's bad. Black Lives Matters. So what they wants to say is that it's just a choice. Some human being says all life matters and Black Lives Matters. The machine is right now saying Black Lives Matters. It should not be the judgment a machine can give. It's the humans who has the wisdom to define in that certain society
the
which it
humans
matters.
will make
So
the
yeah,
judgment
nothing is
finally.
perfect. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you,
So
ma'am.
that is the fine. That is the semantic technologies will make it possible for us. So I state here that we need to have a hybrid of both the symbolic and the sub-symbolic approaches. That is, I am here to advocate the hybrid of symbolic and the sub-symbolic approaches, because the semantic technologies will make it possible by creating links between the disparate and the very heterogeneous data sources.
That's it. Thank you.
Let us start by understanding the semantics. What is semantics? Because semantics is much misunderstood and mostly also unappreciated. Semantics clarifies the sense of a sentence by constructing a relation between various adjoining words. Syntax describes the correct format. Semantics describe the required comprehension and the correct interpretation also. Have a look here. The first one is syntactically wrong. I hope all of you will say also. The second one is syntactically correct, but it is now semantically wrong. The third one is correct in both the manners, syntactically also and semantically also. So now you understand what are semantics. So semantics are words, that is the symbols, plus the accumulated knowledge in our mind. Our mind is saying that the second and the third one are semantically wrong or correct, and the context should also be there. From both the data and application perspective, most machine interpretable and more explicit semantics are very necessary in the loosely coupled world of today. There exists a semantic gap. So we need to incorporate semantics. Have a look on this slide. Different users may have different interpretations for the same vocabulary. For example, see, the machine is looking at data as the low-level features, while the human perception is looking it as an apple. So closing this semantic gap means to define the intentions of each model type by describing the modeling method we need to apply. So we need to close the semantic gap. The approach we will follow is the knowledge graph approach to close the semantic gap, to embed the semantics into the machines, to bring a semantic data model with the machine so that the interoperability, majorly the interoperability problem goes away. For example, say we need to search for Tim Berners-Lee. A search for this Tim Berners-Lee fetches information from different sources. I have shown here DBpedia and Wikidata. So it fetches information from DBpedia and Wikidata, say, then provides search results or recommendations, or the results can also be put to any other application. You can see in Wikidata, there is a sibling of Tim Berners-Lee is there, that is Mike Berners-Lee. The information is about the voice of Tim Berners-Lee. There is information about residence also, that is New Hampshire, USA is there. From DBpedia, there is information that he has 2 children. There are the spouses Rosemary Lath and Nancy Carlson. So there are different information in 2 different knowledge bases. So now you have to use this information, and how you do that? How you do that? By creating knowledge graphs, you are able to do that. You fetch information from different sources and you create a knowledge graph. So this is the knowledge graph that is thereby created. You can see both the different images of Tim Berners-Lee in the center, and then information from both the sources are connected together and a knowledge graph is prepared. So this is a graph. This knowledge graph is in fact a graph, a simple collection of nodes and edges, but put up in a different manner. And how to use it, we all have to learn how to use knowledge graphs. So these knowledge graphs, why are we using them? To build a rich user experience by combining knowledge regarding input keyword from multiple sources. As you can appreciate it now, it is able to combine the knowledge from multiple sources. Use the semantic web knowledge graphs for augmenting the ML algorithms, the ML problems with background knowledge. The ML problems do not use the background knowledge. So what is semantic intelligence? It refers to filling the semantic gap between the understanding of humans and that of machines. How it does that? By making a machine look at everything in terms of object-oriented concepts, that is entities, as a human is able to look at it. The machine is able to perceive at everything in the same abstract manner as human is looking at it. All the important relationships, including who, what, when, where, how, and why in the data from any heterogeneous source are required to be made explicit. I repeat, all the important relationships are to be made explicit through reasoning. Even the implicit knowledge has to be brought out. Semantic intelligence is good old-fashioned AI plus the FAIR principles. So we are adding the FAIR principles to the Rich and Knight book. What is fairification? Fairification means, yes, clarifying the semantics. You need to clarify the semantics of whatever is there. Findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Findable means you are able to find the data. That's it. Data must have rich metadata. This is important. If every data has rich metadata and unique and persistent identifiers, the data becomes findable. The metadata and the data both should be understandable both to humans and machine. How it is possible? It is not data, in fact, when it comes to knowledge, means all the relationships should be explicitly stated. Then it is understandable both to humans and also to machines. Interoperability, this metadata that we have added to make it findable. Metadata is represented by utilizing a semantic data model. I'll talk about what is a semantic data model. Means you are not storing, you are not representing it in Excel files, it is there, the heterogeneous data. It is in JSON format. It is in RDBMS. It is in PDF. It is in CSV. But you integrate all of them, or you provide a common vocabulary. You provide a common semantic data model, and that data model is knowledge graph. That data model is RDF. If you bring RDF as a semantic data model, that is, you utilize knowledge graph for metadata, then your systems become interoperable by themselves. There is no the heterogeneity will never be a problem then. Reusable, that is, yes, easy. Data should leverage the open industry standards. The domain vocabularies, it should leverage, then only it will be reusable. So the FAIR principles are to be followed in addition to the good old fashioned AI. Then we say that we have achieved the semantic intelligence. Let us go through some of the applications of semantic intelligence, so you are better able to appreciate what it is and why do we require semantic intelligence. Have a look on the very first one, that is games. You might have heard of IBM Deep Blue. It conquers the world chess champion Garry Kasparov in May 1997. Then in May 2017, we have Google AlphaGo. It won over the world #1 Go player, Chinese KG. IBM Watson was victorious at Jeopardy. IBM Watson in today's date supports 11 languages. As of March 2020, I have brought the data. IBM Watson is a chatbot which competes on Jeopardy, and it has defeated the TV quiz show's 2 biggest all-time champions, and it also won $1 million. IBM has donated that full amount to charity. One application is semantic search. In May 2012, Google brought the knowledge graphs. If you remember, previously you used to search on Google, you put any keyword and you get a list of websites. You have to click on that website, go to that web page and search for the required information. But now that you can see a info box on the right hand side. For example, you search for Tom Cruise, you get an info box on the right hand side with all the specific information that you might desire. So Google decided to call it semantic search as knowledge graph. It was there way back in May 2012. We started working on knowledge graphs. Then there is digital assistant. In September 2015, Badoo's personal assistant Doer. You can see the image. It is accepting orders at KFC restaurants in China. He is presenting his work. In October 2011, Apple Siri. Today Apple Siri is able to answer questions and make recommendations. That is what all time we required. So it is a natural language UI which can answer to the questions, not only provide a link of a list of various web pages and to find our answer by ourselves. So it performs actions by delegating requests to a set of personal web services. This Apple Siri is performing in this manner. Okay, now I have some excerpts from literature. I don't know how much visible it is to you, but yes, let us try it. This is a very small image. You can see some bibliography, that is the literature on the left hand side, and there is AI in between. We start from the top. The hybrid systems, as I am advocating the hybrid systems. Hybrid systems combine the human and machine learned knowledge. So the airborne magnetic survey imaginary, this is the knowledge it combines, and after combining it, you can see here, no, I am also not even able to read. We can skip this slide. So what I mean to say is the hybrid system should be there. It is the learned knowledge, human, machine or combined. It depends on semantics. Finally, you get the conclusion and advices with explanations. When you incorporate the semantics from the background knowledge, these books, as you can see, this is the background knowledge. That is the terminologies or the ontologies. And on the right hand side, you can see the pattern matching, the ML algorithm, the symbolic approaches. When you draw the patterns and after that you combine it with the ontologies and you get finally the explanations. Before the final conclusion and advice, you are contacting the background knowledge also. and in fact you are able to reduce the number of steps. It will take less time when you have a background knowledge at hand with you. So where we are in now, we to some extent in this short time we are able to understand, at least have a glimpse of what is semantic intelligence. It is already 11:15. Yes, I have 45 minutes more. So I hope I'll be able to cover whatever I have brought with you. Let us have a glimpse of the role of semantic intelligence in the global epidemic. That is the talk for today. For providing explanations, so you have to focus upon now the hybrid of symbolic and the sub-symbolic approaches. How are they bringing goodness to the global epidemic situation, the hybrid? So providing explanations, an ML algorithm can say person A has a B% chance of his chest pain being COVID-19. And the same is also predicted with Z% accuracy. So an ML algorithm can beautifully do this, but most ML algorithms are not able to explain it why. So the doctors are not able to diagnose with 100% accuracy because they do not have those explanations in hand with them. Another is the changing world. The patient records contain information about the state of a patient. Something that is believed at one point might be proven false at some another point of time. So this change also needs to be captured, tracked, and reasoned with. That is the monotonicity I was already telling. The ML algorithms are very much monotonic. So with patient records also, with the COVID-19 situation also, the real data ML algorithms are not able to capture. Remote patient monitoring during COVID-19, during global epidemic, we are able to do. The IoT devices and sensors are being used to monitor patients either at home or in care facility. How they are able to do it? The streams of data which are coming from these wearable sensors or environmental sensors, they are interpreted with respect to the patient record and history and also the generic medical knowledge. This is in fact creating situation awareness and also reasoning, inferencing on potential future situation that is likely to occur. That is to provide a recommendation or alert to prevent dangerous situations and to alert the medical staff. Here, as I already said, we are able to envision several knowledge graphs. Drug discovery also, the knowledge discovery is implying to treat the concepts individually in a local context to allow for various different viewpoints. In this way, the changes are able to happen locally without affecting the final system, the whole knowledge graph. And later on, you could reflect it in the main knowledge graph. Knowledge graphs can later be composed of these components after filtering for certain views which are not relevant. The new knowledge can emerge at every new knowledge graph composition. So with knowledge graphs, it is very much possible. The individual knowledge graphs, this is very important. Consider the online teaching where individuals want to have their own concepts represented in the form of knowledge graphs. So the instructors can have the personalized knowledge graphs. So you require the individual view of every knowledge graph. You could create views. Such additions or changes by a particular instructor should be reflected into the overall shared knowledge graph in case those concepts have emerged. So the changes made need also to be tracked, and one need to determine that which view to use in which specific use case, which view to use, and what knowledge from individual context to propagate, and what should stay in private and which view to be stayed private, which view to be made public, and inside one view itself, what knowledge to keep private and what knowledge to make public. Crisis detection, yes, inputs for the large scale events. For example, these natural disasters, terrorism, battle spaces, crime, they are very frequent and they are conflicting also. The inputs are very conflicting. Sometimes you are getting one input, another you are getting a conflicting input. So you require to reason on what has actually occurred and what is currently happening, because this may conflict with each other. The underlying knowledge graph will visualize everything and render all such information, as well as it is It can track the provenance and uncertainty. What is provenance? It is the source of information.
There are like I said, artificial intelligence is great detecting the crisis, but then there is a recent data which being published 2 or 3 weeks back. There is a Santa Clarita and a Monterey County where police are utilizing the artificial intelligence tools. These are done by some of the new startup industries in the Bay Area. So the flow is still like the wisdom. That's what my point is still not there. So what happens? Let's say there is a specific area I call the East San Jose, where our couple of incidences happen, and the traction happens like a lot of 911 calls in that specific area. So the algorithm tells to the police that you need more surveillance and monitoring in the East San Jose for the next couple of days, because the trend was being generated on the pattern which has happened like 2 or 3 weeks back. But then suddenly what happens if something happens back then in the East San Jose instead of the West San Jose? So there are like only 2 incidence calls. So what I'm saying, the artificial intelligence is not what the complete humanity will, tends to depend blindly on it, because it just depends upon the analysis and the information which is being fed into that system for that unique thing or a task to be done. This is great at helping out, but then and that incidence happens because most heavy police force is now utilizing, and there was just some kind of a lawsuit or thing happens. It was just a news in the monitoring that if we so much leverage on artificial intelligence, if police are using a role modeling of these AI tools, so there are backdrops of that. So every time they just keep going to the West San Jose and the East San Jose is dropped out. If something happens, the half of the police force is surveillancing there, because that's what the rules and things they're getting from the AI traction tools. So
yeah, Mr. Vikrant, you have very well captured the concept. This is what I want to focus and enforce, that if I talk to my students in today's date in my institute, we ask them to bring a problem, we ask them to start working on their project, and they say, everybody in the class is saying, madam, we want to work on ML, we want to work with ML algorithms. And I'm really getting hard time to convince them that you have to embed semantics into your ML algorithms. Without background knowledge, your ML algorithms will not able to perform well, will not able to get the appropriate speed, will not able to explain what they are predicting. They will predict well, but they will not be able to explain what they are predicting. Very important point, the explanations. Another important point, the cold start problem, as I just mentioned. For the fully developed systems for which we have lot many data sets, yes, they are good enough. But for COVID-19 situation, for example, for the crisis situation, because something that has just happened, from where you will get the data set to predict anything? So you will just sit and wait for the data to be collected for 1 month, and then you will start applying ML algorithm. So that will be complete rubbish. While the hybrid approaches, the contextual computing works upon background knowledge. So you do have background knowledge also, and you could avoid the cold start problem. So this is my point to emphasize. Okay, let us get back. So crisis detection, yes, I have already told. So it is enabling the evolution of data in its graph version, and you are able to detect the crisis. Open standards are playing a great role. We have linked open data sets, the LOD cloud, some of you might have heard of. The required data is not available at the beginning of a pandemic. I was just saying that when the time is changing, you do not have the data, and deep learning relies on the available data only from the well-structured data from the Kaggle data set they rely upon. The open standards allow the global generation of data, information and knowledge networks at the rates that match and even exceed the COVID-19 infection rate. You could generate the data and utilize that data if you have certain open standards with you. So it will, these open standards, that is the LOD cloud, is going to play a major role, because what the data is generated by public. So the public should generate the data and put it at a central open repository, that is the LOD cloud, to be used by all the researchers, academicians and industry people. let us have certain initiatives which have come across for the knowledge graph. Yes, the society, the community is working, and the major work in this is going in Europe side of the world. The COVID-19 knowledge graph is one of them. They created their knowledge graph from the COVID-19 data set that is available at the Kaggle. There are certain implications of this knowledge graph. They have provided an improved reading tool. Actually, what is this knowledge graph? It is a knowledge graph of COVID-19 literature, the complete literature that is available on COVID-19 till date. They have prepared a knowledge graph of that literature, means they are able to connect all the literature terms to each other. Now you could explore all the literature, and you could browse, you could visualize all the literature connected to each other. So there is an improved reading tool available to quickly find articles. Maybe you want to find COVID-19 literature article from same author or published in the same journal having the same concepts and so on. So you could do that through linked data. Advanced querying is available. All the general graph applications are there. You could find clusters. You could find all the articles, say, published in journal X. The nearest neighbor recommendations you could find means, for example, you are reading an article and you have certain nearest neighbor recommendations which are nearest to this article. This is COVID-19 knowledge graph. Then we have COVID graph. A diverse team from academia and industry has integrated various data sets that were initially data silos. You understand the difference? The COVID-19 knowledge graph has worked on all the literature available on COVID-19. It is inside the COVID-19 data set at Kaggle. The COVID graph people have integrated all the different data sets that are available. Now you're able to browse the information for any gene or any other thing. You could query all the symptoms of genes or proteins. This is able to help researchers quickly and efficiently find their way through the COVID-19 various data sets which were there like data silos. They were lying. They were heterogeneous. So now they represented all those data sets, those heterogeneous data sets in a concrete manner using the semantic data model. So the single data model, which is unique for everyone now, it allows to explore papers, patents, and existing treatments, the medications around the family of various coronaviruses. Another knowledge graph is the COVID-19 SQL knowledge graph. Why do they say SQL knowledge graph? Because they didn't, I'm not able to discuss because of lack of time. Otherwise, when we talk of knowledge graphs, then you have various synchronization formats. For example, NTriples, Turtle, JSON, RDF. So you have to use any one of them. Then you have various storage techniques. You could store them, your knowledge graphs, you could store them in RDBMS also. You could store them in triple stores also. You could store them in graph databases also. So these people have stored it in RDBMS. That is why they say SQL knowledge graph. The Israeli tech firm Timber AI, they created a COVID-19 knowledge graph mapped to all the data sources available worldwide and freely accessible to analysts, data scientists, and researchers to work upon to develop applications over their knowledge graph. So all of them are open to do that. It focuses on the ontology of healthcare and government research questions and needs. And you have Grasp for Good 2020. It is linking again the various heterogeneous data sets about COVID-19. COVID-19 on FHIR, semantics for COVID-19 discovery. It is a linked data version of the COVID-19 open data set. They have put all the data sets on linked open data. The linked data version is available now. The Allen Institute, it represented it in FHIR RDF. That is the synchronization format that I was just discussing. Data mining the COVID-19 data set, then adding the semantic annotations. It is also a vast topic in itself. If I discuss about what are semantic annotations, in short is adding metadata to your data so that it becomes, as I just said, findable. If you want to make your data, your knowledge findable, then you have to put metadata to that data, and that is just adding semantic annotations to it. The purpose of making it is to facilitate linkage with other data sets. If you have metadata annotations, then only you could able to link one data set with another data set, and you enable answering better research questions. So it is also available in GitHub for growing. Now, the background knowledge I was talking about, various background knowledge people have worked upon. Schema.org is a very popular and important example of the background knowledge. Then there is good relations ontology, Wikidata, DBpedia I've just talked about. Mainly schema.org people use for product classifications. They have extended the schema.org vocabulary in its 7.0 version. A fast-tracked new vocabulary. Fast-tracked, why? Because they have developed it in a hurry. It is new to assess the global response to the coronavirus outbreak. There are three major additions they have made to this version. That is, special announcements are available. Virtual locations are available, because for any online event, you could put a location as an attribute where this event is happening. But now the location is virtual. It is online meet. COVID-19 testing facility are available. The school district where it is available. Then you have pseudo ontology is there. You have various ontologies. Now it is a new term, I think, introduced here. I will tell you what is ontology later on in the next slides. So various knowledge graphs are there. Various ontologies are also developed. One is the pseudo ontology, the ontology of coronavirus infectious disease. An ontology is in fact a vocabulary. You could assume it in this manner, as we had this schema.org vocabulary, DBpedia. Similarly, you have ontology. You could interchangeably use this word with knowledge graph also. So pseudo is focused on analyzing COVID-19 from a medical standpoint, means similarity to other viruses, the common symptoms, drugs that have been attempted to treat the virus, etc. Then you have codo ontology. It is the very recent, even the publication is not out till date, but it is available on Arxiv. One US guy and one Indian guy, I think Bisma Datta, has worked upon it. It is an explicit ontology for use by data and service providers to publish their COVID-19 data using FAIR principles. The very first application of this is on actual data from the Government of India. It has over 23,000 individuals and so on. The other COVID-19 ontologies available are drugs for COVID-19, COVID-19 surveillance ontology, linked COVID-19 data ontology. There is Project Domino, which is leveraging the social networks for promoting positive behavior and diffuse misinformation for the COVID-19 disaster response. The issues involved are scale, timeliness, precision, and sustainability. But the difference I have brought it here is it is leveraging the social networks for promoting the positive behavior. Another is Benevolent AI. It is a UK-based company. It aims to transform the way medicines are being discovered. They combine the machine learning and knowledge graphs, as I want to advocate, to find better treatments for COVID-19. So you could explore all this. The Benevolent is doing great. We come to enabling the intelligent applications. That is the enabling technologies I want to come forward after understanding what is semantic intelligence, after advocating that we have to work on the hybrid approach, that is the contextual computing, the hybrid of symbolic and the sub-symbolic approaches. Let us have a quick glimpse for 10 minutes on what is that technology, how do we do, what are the various semantic technologies available that are enabling the intelligent applications. So we have two for that, that is enabling the intelligent applications, and next is the semantic web vision. So here you can see I have brought it in front in the form of a table in front of you with a stack. You can see on the very bottom there is the foundation technologies, then the serialization formats, then the data model, and then the ontologies, final, or the inference, the vocabulary. You can also see a time span from 1988 to 2014 for the development of various technologies. And by 2014, we can say that yes, they have been established till date and they are standardized by now. Starting from the simple web technologies, you can see in the foundation technologies, 1988 came Unicode, then HTTP, HTML, you all are aware of these semantic technologies. They are called the web technologies, in fact. Then came the serialization format. You can see up the serialization format XML came. Then came the data model RDF. So RDF is better than XML. I can speak on this also sometime later on. We'll do that. Then came URI as the foundation. It is the foundation technology, that is every resource, every entity, every object, every property has to get a unique resource identifier that is different from anybody else. For example, for literatures, you have DOI. So to every entity, the semantic world wish to attach a URI. Then you can see RDFS. So all these semantic technologies are there with increasing level of expressivity as we go upwards. OWL is the most common language of ontologies in which we devise ontologies. Otherwise, we could do, you look backward, we could do it in RDFS also, we could do in RDF also. But OWL is more expressive than either of RDFS or RDF. Then you can see RDFA microformats as the serialization formats. You can see SWRL in the ontology layer. This is the rule language, because we advocate that symbolic approaches are to be there. So you need to write rules. So you need to have a rule language, that is semantic web rule language, SWRL. Then you can see Sparkle. It is the query language over the RDF knowledge bases. I say instead of database, you have to use knowledge base. What is the difference? The difference is of relationships. You have more relationships in knowledge base, and you are storing your knowledge bases in triple stores instead of RDBMS. So on RDBMS, as you query with SQL, similarly knowledge bases you query with Sparkle. So the syntactic flexibility is increasing as you go down, and the semantic flexibility, the semantics increases as we go up. As we go up, you are more effective, efficient, more semantics. As I already said, expressiveness increases as you go up. The computational complexity also increases. The reasoning capability also increases. Have a look here. I don't know. Yes, to some extent it is visible. To have a more better idea on what is a knowledge graph, please look carefully. You can see at the top, at the bottommost layer, you can see 3 documents. So these are web accessible documents, which can be accessible over web. They can be HTML. You can see COVID-19 random notes, COVID-19 Google spreadsheet, COVID-19 tweets. So they can be heterogeneous. They can be in any format, but they are web accessible. So these various documents may have some entity description. For example, you could have this term SARS-CoV-2 inside 2 of these documents, 1 and 2. Then you can see COVID-19 as a term in the middle layer. It is connected to 2 documents in the bottom layer. So this COVID-19 term has been found in 2 documents. Similarly, New York, you could find in some of these documents. So you are extracting these terms using NLP. From these web accessible documents, using NLP, you are extracting these terms from the document text and creating knowledge graph. So this is the knowledge graph, that is the middle layer. You have created knowledge graph. That is the graph of instances. Now you have already metadata as the topmost layer, as you can see. That is the entity definition knowledge graph or the ontology. The classes and properties are lying there. You can see New York is connected to US suit. You can see COVID-19 is a disease. SARS-CoV-2 is a type of virus. So all these are classes in the blue pane: virus, disease, property. These are place, these are classes. And in the middle pane, you can see instances. So what is the difference between an ontology and a knowledge graph? An ontology comprises of the classes you can see in the topmost pane. A knowledge graph comprises of instances, as you can see in the middle pane. and then you have your documents which are web accessible, and they can be heterogeneous, they can be in any format, they can be notes, simple unstructured, they can be the Google spreadsheet, they can be the Twitter handles. I hope this diagram might have brought a better picture in front of you that what is a knowledge graph. So this is a sample taken from a very recent paper. It is the knowledge graph for COVID-19 that I also brought in the example. This is an ontology, the pseudo ontology I have brought in the use case already. You can see animal in the between as a class. SARS-CoV-2 infects animal. Then you can see on the bottom COVID-19 disease, the COVID-19 disease process, lung and so on. There is a human being at the top who is an animal. So if SARS-CoV-2 is infecting the animal, then the human is by default infected. So this is the ontology, the pseudo ontology, the screenshot I have brought from pseudo. So this is also a general confusion in the research field. What is ontology? What is knowledge base? What is knowledge graph? Yes, when we have only the abstract idea, we can use all the three terms interchangeably. But to be specific, there is a succinct difference, and that is we map it with a database, then it is easier for you to understand. As in a database, you have a schema, then you have the data inside the tables. Similarly, we have a T box. As I've written T box, this is the schema. A box is the data inside the tables. So we have T box and A box. We call it knowledge base. There you call schema and data. That is T box plus A box becomes the knowledge base. Now the difference between ontology, knowledge base and knowledge graph. Once you have understood what is the knowledge base. Ontology is the schema, that is the T box. Knowledge graph is the instances, that is the A box. This is the major definition and usage, what most of the researchers are using it in this manner. I repeat, knowledge base comprise of T box and A box both. The ontology is the T box and the knowledge graph is the A box. So I have already told the knowledge graph is to be used as the semantic data model. A knowledge graph is an intelligent model that presents real world entities and the relationships to one another in a graphical structure in front of you. A query like Taj Mahal has much more richer meaning than just the two words Taj and Mahal. There is a relationship when you put them together. Otherwise, by Taj, you could have mukut on your, we call it mukut also on your head. That is Taj. Otherwise, for Mahal, you can have various Mahals, but Taj Mahal has some specific meaning attached to it. A knowledge graph helps us discover new information very quickly and easily. It's something like looking at the world like we humans do. There are various examples for the private knowledge graph. The Google knowledge graph is private and not accessible to people. The Google Knowledge Vault, Microsoft Satori, Yahoo knowledge graph, Facebook graph, all the major giants are using the knowledge graphs in today's date, and you also as a researcher should jump to using knowledge graphs. The public knowledge graphs, I have already shown examples of them. DBpedia, Wikidata, Yago, Null, OpenCyc, Freebase. Then certain domain specific knowledge graphs, they can be public, they can be private, but they are domain specific. Research space has the cultural heritage. Life sciences, you have many knowledge domain specific knowledge graphs in life sciences. For pharmaceutical industry, for telecommunications. Here you can have a brief view of everything. How do we work with knowledge graphs? You can see on the top you have different data sources. Using NLP, you do data transformation and integration. As I just said, you create knowledge graph by picking instances from all these data sources. When you create the knowledge graph, now using various algorithms, you develop different applications. For example, semantic search, question answering and all. Look at certain examples to have a better understanding. Again, using the Google Knowledge Graph for semantic search. Michael Jackson may be a favorite for most of you. When you search for Michael Jackson, what you see on the right hand side, there is an info box. So in this info box, you get the semantic search. They are not, the Google Knowledge Graph in today's date tries to give you the answer to your question instead of just throwing certain web addresses in front of you. We are using the Google Knowledge Graph for discovering the related entities. As soon as you say Michael Jackson's music albums, as you can see in the search bar, all the related music albums, all the related videos come in front of you. You could scroll and find them. You search for music albums by Michael Jackson and you get all of them. So you are using Google Knowledge Graph for factual answers. I just said question answering. You say what is the date of birth of Michael Jackson and you get it as an answer. So this is the question answering systems by virtue of knowledge graphs. The LinkedIn is using its economic graph. Knowledge graph, so you are using a semantic data model. I have already defined what is a knowledge graph. This is in literature, you could not find one definition. So this is I have brought for you. Why are we using knowledge graphs? To enable the search of things as compared to strings. Mind it, we are searching for things and not strings. When you write Michael Jackson, then Google is not reading it as a string. It is reading it as one concrete entity, one concrete people, thing, that is Michael Jackson, having some importance, some meaning. It enables the retrieval of related information also that is relevant to a query. Provides the multifaceted, that is the 360-degree and all side views of the objects. Yes, there exists a trade-off. If you want better accuracy and completeness, you have to increase the human effort. If you want the degree of formality, user involvement is to be increased. Coverage and accuracy for better accuracy, for better coverage. Simplicity versus support for plurality and provenance also. Either it will be very simple, either it will be having good provenance. So there is a trade-off, you have to select one. For samples also, Wikipedia you might be aware of, we call it a knowledge graph in today's date, but it is built by humans and it is for human consumption only. The machines cannot read Wikipedia. So we have done Wikidata, the research community, which is for machines and by machines. The second level is for machines and used by humans only. The machines are not able to use it. WordNet and CYC. Then comes the next and the best level, made by machines and to be used by machines. DBpedia, Wikidata, Yago, Nell. Semantic web vision, I will spend 3 to 4 minutes on this. You are aware of the web 1.0, which connects information. The read-only web, www, shopping carts and static web is an example. Then came read, write, publish web. The social connectivity increased, but the information connectivity and the semantics remained the same. We call it web 2.0, for example, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. Then came the semantics increased and came the semantic web, the vision by Tim Berners-Lee. So the examples are DBpedia, e-commerce, semantic search is available now, increased semantics is there. Now, if you want both the social connectivity and better semantics and connectivity and information connectivity, we call it Web X.0, that is the meta web, 4.0, 5.0. For example, the Facebook's Open Graph protocol is there. The Twitter's annotations are there. Web 5.0 is the symbiotic web. The line between human and machine is becoming blur. This web is acting like a personal assistant for us. So it is the web that know everything, that know, learn and reason as we humans do. That is Web 5.0 or Web X.0, we say it. How to achieve the semantic web vision? Web of documents is by humans, for humans, so we have to go them away with. we have to use web of data model, which is by machines and for machines. You have to be entity centric. You have to publish machine processable data, as I'm already telling. You have to build machines to process this data. So web of data is linked data, that is the open standards. The vocabularies, that is the ontologies and the knowledge graphs. The embedded metadata in any synchronization format, RDFA or micro formats you could take up. This will make your web of data, and this is the future. So I am to the end of my slides, and this is the last slide for today. The takeaways, that is the semantic intelligence. All of us have to come to it either today or tomorrow. Though technology has contributed in every sphere of global epidemic and in the fight against COVID-19, the COVID-19 virus acted as a litmus test for the current intelligent applications and exposed some of the key shortfalls. So what is the takeaway? I have put certain solution keywords for it. Semantic intelligence, knowledge graphs, explainable AI, ontology, situation awareness, RDF as the semantic data model, contextual computing, knowledge, the FAIR principles. I hope I'm able to do my job, and I'm able to bring in the importance of semantic intelligence in front of the audience that is available on this online platform in this meeting. Here is a list of bibliography. You could go through it later on also through the video that is being recorded maybe. Thank you very much. To end it, I like to comment over the Charles Darwin statement. It is not the strongest of the species who survive, nor the most intelligent who survive. Rather, it is those most responsive to change. So you have to be responsive to change. You have to change the technology that is happening today to bring this change, and to make it happen, to make it actionable intelligence, not only simple intelligence. Any questions and comments are most welcome, please.
Excuse me, madam, have we, my question is layman questions. Have we achieved the peak of the COVID in India or not?
Have we achieved the
Peak, or it is a, no, it will decrease, or it is flattening, or what trend it has got right now?
I'll not be able to very succinctly comment over this statement, but yes, I should say that to be true, for many months it is to go, and we have to look into it for next at least 3 months, because the winters are coming. We have to do whatever we are doing today, so we have to go with it. I don't know whether I understood your query or not.
Yes, I think you got it now.
Okay then. Yes, anyone else from anything you like to discuss? Because I still have 5 to 6 minutes, and I'll be very happy to answer anything regarding how to utilize semantic intelligence for any domain, say it be COVID-19, the global pandemic. And for global pandemic, I have told that it is very important because of the cold start problem. Yes, explanations are very important, but because of the cold start problem, we do not have the data gathered in the beginning. So we have to utilize semantic intelligence, and here comes the failure of technology today, which COVID-19 has showed us the mirror. Okay, I hope there are no queries as far. So open to you people. You could ask your queries later also. Whenever you feel, you could drop an email to me. I am open to it. Thank you so much. So over to the organizers.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. It was